Hi, folks. Welcome to my first book review. I wanted to focus on the context of ambition and goal setting this month, in part because we're close to the first quarter and New Year's season of goal setting, but also because in the work that I've been doing with women, a lot of the time I find that I'm ready to move on to ambitious goals. What do you want out of your life? Let's find a way to make it happen. And it actually takes some time and a more fluid process of figuring out what that even is. I think one of the reasons is that a lot of the time women are more likely to be expected to work other people's priorities into their goals, and it can be hard to kind of un-enmesh some of the things that other people want from us from what we actually want from ourselves. And I think some of it is just about bringing a more fluid and playful approach into how we set goals. So the books that I'm going to talk about today are The Renaissance Ole by Margaret Lobenstine, The Desire Map by Danielle LaPorte, and then this really beautiful book called The Crossroads of Should and Must by Find and Follow Your Passion by Luna, who's an artist and designer. All right, so The Renaissance Ole, this is probably my favorite book that I read this entire of the set. It's amazing, and if anybody out there has multiple passions, this book is for you. She comes up with this phrase of the Renaissance Ole to describe people who are interested in multiple things, and the book is really about reframing that from something that has, I guess, recently historically been seen as bad, been seen as, you're going to end up as a destitute artist, or you're never going to have any direction in life, and actually looking at how that's a highly culturally and temporally specific narrative that comes out of a lot of what we know in the post-World War II period, where the company man has one thing he works on and he rises up through his career and he's not distracted by these other interests, and that's flaky, and he's disciplined and committed. And so she actually looks at how in other historic periods, and possibly in today's world, having multiple passions is actually a really good thing. She looks at Ben Franklin versus Mozart. Ben Franklin was an inventor, he was a diplomat, he was highly successful at multiple things he did. Mozart was a musician, and that was his thing his whole life, and both of them found different ways of reaching success. But Mozart died young, and Ben Franklin died much older and happy. And it's not to say that the company man is going to be unhappy, but this narrative of the multi-passionate person is going to never be fulfilled is just blatantly wrong. So I'm sure we all know the people who have kind of moved on from one shiny object to the next. So what strategies do you use as a Renaissance Ole in order to run your life so that you don't have to start over again from the beginning? So a couple I want to pull out of here. One is she has people use a system she calls focal points. So focal points are things that you are interested in pursuing. They can be anything from collecting farm implements to going hiking to becoming a filmmaker to being a better and more connected and committed father. But she suggests that you have around 5 focal points. And part of why you do that is because there's many resources that can be subdivided to smaller and smaller pieces, but attention and focus is not one of those resources. And so what she suggests is that you define, based on your values, and she takes you through a process, your 5 focal points. And then if something else comes along, that's okay, right? You're not going to have to, marry these things forever, but that you have some that are on your list and some are on your someday maybe list. And one day, someday maybe becomes today, but you think about your attention and focus as being a resource that you only spend on a certain number of things per time, right? Another thing she does is she has you look at all the things that take up your time and to really understand what drives them, and are they driven by my values or driven by their values? And there can mean a lot of things. Sometimes it means, like driving your kids to soccer practice is maybe not my value, but it's an important thing to do. And their values doesn't necessarily mean you have to cut it out. But what you can do is you can think about it and whether it can be cut out or whether it can be renegotiated. So she talks about an example of somebody who cleaned every Saturday and realized that theirs was actually, it was their value, and that them was her mother, who had a certain standard of what a house should look like, and it wasn't the same as this woman's standard. So she sat down with her partner and they came up with, okay, this is what we really want. Like, we're gonna do we're gonna do the kind of like efficient clean. It's not gonna be the deep clean. And like, let's renegotiate it, right? Let's have it fit in a smaller footprint in our lives. She also talked about somebody who downgraded the big holiday party that they used to host to a 4th of July barbecues because it was easier and it accomplished the same goals and was less work and less stress. So she also talks about, and I love this, but the ways in which we can think of our interests and focal points as either being overlapped with our jobs, maybe we have more than one job and they're overlapped, or maybe they overlap somewhat with our jobs, or sometimes our jobs are about pushing forward a focal point. So she helps us be really strategic about how to organize our work lives in relation to our focal points. She talks about something called a JOB, which is a job that pushes forward a focal point. And it doesn't just have to be straightforward, like, I'm an artist, I want to be an artist, and so therefore my focal point has to be my job. I have to work very underpaid in a museum in order to push forward my goals, right? That sometimes that is actually not the best JOB. She talks about moving from being an innkeeper to moving into doing career and passion coaching. And so she got a JOB proctoring driver's tests. And so what it did for her was it gave her a lot of time when she was sitting there waiting for people to finish their tests, where she could write and read and develop her thought leadership around this new career path for herself. But she was also working with guidance counselors, and so she ended up getting her first set of clients via the networking she did through this job. And one of the things that I just am totally in love with about this book is that it's not just for people who are in positions of wealth and privilege. So she talks about a young woman who had children before she was able to go to college, was a cleaning lady, but found a way to take her job and make it a JOB. She worked for a hotel that had a program that would help pay for higher ed for its employees. And I think they generally thought that maybe it would be people at the front desk who were taking advantage of this program, but she took advantage of the program and she was able to push forward her focal points through her job. So, okay, second book I like, The Desire Map. This is by Danielle LaPorte, who is an incredibly colorful rock star kind of gal. And she, the basic premise of this book is that we make these goals, but they tend to be about extrinsic things, right? Like, I want to have this many followers. I want to take a vacation this year. I want to buy a new couch. But that what we're really pursuing is the feelings that those goals produce. And so she calls it creating goals with the soul. And the idea is to figure out what our core desired feelings are and then to use those as the things that we push forward. What I really like about this book is that I see one of the moments that comes up a lot because I work with a lot of architects is there are certain goals that are they're highly linear in architecture. It's getting licensed. So I see women who work really, really hard. It takes them, 5 to 7 years. They finally take all the tests, they get all the hours, they get their license. And then they look around and they say, now what, right? I haven't been thinking for the past couple years about the kind of professional I want to be. Who do I want to work with? Like, what, if I've been on this ladder, like, what's that next step on the ladder? Do I want to become an associate? Do I want to become partner? And how do I even get there? And I think it's this moment where, they realize what got you here won't get you there, which is a big theme that comes up all the time in my work and my coaching. What gets you there is thinking about the kind of professional who you want to be. And sometimes that's not a really straightforward process, and I'll talk about that a little bit with the next book. But focusing on not just the outcome, but how you want to feel means that you don't just get there and then, feel this empty sense of accomplishment or a sense of accomplishment that only goes so far because you haven't really thought about the richness of that ambition and that rich experience. So she applies this idea in 2 ways that I think are really useful. Number one, she talks about this idea of being focused on the feelings we want to feel instead of the outcomes when we're in high pressure situations, like speaking or pitching something or, in a meeting. And so instead of, got to get this job, if you focus on, here's what I want to feel at this job interview. I want to feel smart. I want to feel clever. I want to feel a little bit snarky. I want to feel, focusing on the feelings means that you're not so hung up on the outcome that you can't actually be in the moment, and you're also much less likely to have performance anxiety. So that's actually a strategy that was brought in by a speaker in my workshop that I've also begun to teach women to do when they think about speaking or high pressure situations. The other thing that she talks about is sometimes it's about choosing less over more. And again, this is one of those what got you here won't get you there moments. Sometimes I see women who are just used to like grinding as hard as they can to get to the next step, feel like I'm working, but I'm not getting there. And sometimes the answer is actually not about addition, but it's actually about subtraction. So one of the assignments that I give people it's called Say No to Say Yes. So I have some women spend the week saying no to almost everything they can say no to, or saying not yet, because sometimes it's easier to say not yet, I'll do it next week, and when it's no longer relevant. It's easier than outright saying no, which sometimes has social consequences for women. But they do that in order to make space to be able to say yes to what they actually want to be driving their time and their priorities. And sometimes you need to be able to create that vacuum instead of just responding to what everyone else wants. So yeah, and she just says, and I really like it, simplifying what you put out into the world doesn't mean you have to expect less in return. You can stop with the overtime and overcompensating and still get a raise. You can stop trying to be the most wonderful guy in the room and still attract the right woman. You can ease up on yourself without shrinking your dreams. And I think there's this element of a jump or faith or trust in the sense that you don't have to be everything to everyone, but you can still get what you want. And that's a way that I see women get stuck, is they feel like they need to stay on the treadmill instead of saying, you know what, I need to know where this thing is actually going, and I need to make some choices about what to say no to in order to make sure that the boat is really going where I want it to go. Okay, so perfect segue to The Crossroads of Should and Must by Elle Luna. I am a really visual person, and this book is just really pretty. She is an artist, and she does a lot of drawings and paintings for this book, and it's just like, you just want to touch it. It's just so pretty. But it's also really useful. So for Elle Luna was a designer who really liked her job, but felt like there was something more that she wanted, and eventually found out that was painting. And so when she talks about should and must, should are the things that we feel like we need to do in our lives, right? Sometimes for other people, sometimes because it's what people do, what responsible people do. And must is that inner drive of what we really want to do. And for those of you who are saying like, oh God, I don't know what my must is, like chill out. We'll talk about that in a second. But even though for Elle Luna, she talks about this as, in a kind of more classic way of, I jumped to have my artistic career. I actually think that the frameworks in here are really useful, even if you're not an artist or a creative at heart. For me, the decision to pitch my workshop for the first time really felt like a must. And that was this jump, because it was scary. It was really scary. That took me to eventually another set of jumps that ended up with me doing this workshop, which feels like a calling. So part of what I like about this book is that, first of all, she talks a little bit about how to find that must. And sometimes I see people get stuck because it's similar to this issue with the focal points. You feel like you have to find the one thing you want in life before you start to take steps and move forward. And in reality, it just doesn't work that way. Sometimes you do, and then you think, and then you take a couple steps, you try things out. It's a highly iterative process, which is really hard for people who are highly left brain, like myself. But turns out life just doesn't, like we don't make the plan and then execute it. Sometimes we have to be moving forward because a step we take, all of a sudden the picture in front of us changes and comes into focus a little bit better. So some of those strategies are how do you find that must, and they're great. And one of the strategies she uses that I am really excited about integrating in my workshop and coaching with women is that you actually, so it's really one of the ways you find your must is you actually learn what your should is and understand its specific aspects so that you can negotiate with the power it has over your life. And so you set up two chairs facing each other. You put your should in one chair and you sit in the other chair and you have a conversation with it about what it wants from you, what it feels like you need to do, why it's afraid. And if this sounds like something scary, it is scary. And a lot of the time, though, those moments where we're kind of naked with our own truth, sitting there uncomfortable, being like, how does this work? That's a lot of the time where insights really appear. So I've kind of nabbed that for women in my workshop. And the other thing she does that I really like is that she talks about the things that prevent us from following the must. So sometimes it's money, right? Money scarcity. What if your must does not pay? How do you think about that? The other one is time. And so she has this, and well, I'll talk about it in a second. One of the ways that time plays out that I've seen happen for women who I work with. Another is, not having enough space or resources. And then a fourth is, she calls it vulnerability, but I think it's really fear of failure. So ways that you can start or take that first step and how to kind of face that fear and be able to start moving forward and start on this iterative process. But when it comes to time, I thought this was, I'm going to like Xerox, I'm actually going to just get the book because I love it, but like Xerox this page, keep it in your wallet. One of the things that I see women struggle with is this sense that it's too late for them. And sometimes it's about following a passion, but sometimes it's about, here's where I'm supposed to be in my 30s. Here's where I'm supposed to be in my 40s. And this idea that like, we're off the path, we're not fitting the milestones. And then sometimes that leads us to think that we just need to like throw up our hands and give up altogether. And that's one of the worst things that we can do. And we need to have a sense of optimism about taking the first step. So she talks about people, this is all about the decades in your life, but I'm past my prime. But like, turns out Julia Child found food in her 40s. I didn't know that. I guess it's probably fairly common knowledge, but I think it's pretty incredible, right? She talks about this woman who was 81 and ran her 12th consecutive New York City marathon. And she started running at the age of 69, right? So it's not too late. It's not too late to be who you want to be, to do what you want to do. And yeah, I just want to read this. This is about fear of failure, but I just want to read it before I leave you. So now what? Just get up and work every day? Yes. Alone? Most likely. For what? Unclear. For whom? Yourself. For how long? No one knows. Why? Because you've got to. But what if I fail? You will. And then what? You get to decide if you keep doing this. Is this a bad idea? There's no such thing. Which, by the way, I personally disagree with. But, finding your passion, it does not need to fall in the same category as like, drunk drag racing or something like that. All right, moving on. Sorry. But what if it's horrible? Stop doubting, start doing. Will we have this conversation again tomorrow? If you wish. Where does it all lead? Grab the nearest tool, work, and in time, you will know. All right, so I hope that this has been helpful for some of you. Wherever you are, whatever you're working on, I think that it helps to take a step back and think about how are we getting there? Why do we want what we want? And if any of these books have been interesting to you, pick up a copy. I can recommend all three of them, and it's been fantastic to be able to read them, process them with you in mind. And I'd love to hear how any of this information might help you with what you're going through on your journey. So reach out, send an email, and thank you. Have a great week.